This is the World Organic News for the week ending 12th of February 2018. John Moore reporting. Following on from last week and the new vision statement for the podcast and blog, Decarbonise the Air, Recarbonise the Soil, I'm calling on my listeners to put forward ideas for an interview episode once a month. If you know anyone who is doing either part of the vision, I'd love to hear from them, or indeed from you, if you are on the front line doing the work. I'm looking for natural farmers, that is, those implementing the Fukuoka methods, regenerative farmers, permaculturalists, organic farmers, people with solar PV and battery setups, small-scale hydro systems, personal wind generators and so on. I can probably toss in earthship builders as well. Advocates for the above are also welcome to get in touch. Please email me at podcast@worldorganicnews.com. I look forward to hearing from you. And now on to this week's material. I'm going to focus on the 3 principles of the Fukuoka method as I've applied them in my systems. I'm in the process of changing homes, and so a review is helpful for both your narrator and, I hope, my listeners. The 3 principles are 1. No digging, 2. No weeding, and 3. No bare soil. Way back in episode 17 of the Organic Gardener podcast, link in the show notes, I was being interviewed by Jackie the host and brought up the idea of no-dig gardening. This was something new to her, and I suspect to many of her listeners. The idea goes back to observations of nature. While it is true that some animals dig, pigs, rabbits and so on, the vast majority do not. This means normal processes of soil formation rely upon material being layered on top of existing soil. I've spoken elsewhere of the soil profile in the Monero where I lived for 7 years, where the opposite effect was observed. Instead of topsoil being built up over time, clearing of tree cover, ploughing and overgrazing led to topsoil from uphill moving downwards, smothering and destroying the original life-sustaining ancient topsoils. What I'm advocating and have practiced is the use of organic matter as a sponge on top of the soil as we find it. The best material I've ever used was bedding from the goat shed. It was filled with droppings and soaked at the lower levels with urine. The bedding material itself varied from straw, oaten straw at the time, to spill feed, loosened meadow haze, to false bracken. This material was allowed to accumulate over 6 months and varied in depth from 30 to 50 centimetres in the goat shed, about 1 foot to 1 3/4 feet. This I hauled onto the garden beds in spring and autumn after harvesting. These beds were then immediately planted with seedlings raised separately. I also had a worm farm going and would toss a couple of handfuls of worm casting laden material on top of the goat bedding. In the autumn the beds were relatively warm as the material decomposed, and in summer the extra heat boosted germination rates as well. After the first year I broke the rules and dropped a spade into some of the beds to see what was going on underground. The beds had been started on a yellow sandy topsoil with relatively large grain sizes that drank water and wouldn't retain any. The bedrock was sandstone. The small exploratory holes revealed colour and structural change. The soil was now a rich humus black, was perfectly moist and chock-a-block full of earthworms. I have never used a spade in the garden since. The system works and I see the evidence in the plants. Now to no weeding. The idea behind this is as follows. By starting with clean material for the garden beds, I am not importing weed seeds. And by layering on the topsoil, I am smothering any extant weed seeds that are there. By planting closely together, I am denying the weeds sunlight. If after all these steps a weed still appears, I simply leave it alone. Most garden weeds are of the sort that colonise bare soils after glacier melts. They are, usually, deep-rooted or have a ground-level rosette of leaves. These 2 characteristics mean 2 things. 1. Minerals held deep within the subsoil will be pulled to the surface through the taproot and become available in the garden after the weed dies. And 2, the rosette of leaves is protecting the soil. The way the layering of material works is that these weeds never get the opportunity to set seed before they are buried under the next layering of garden beds. So rather than seeing weeds as a problem, I see them as a useful addition. Now, if the land you're taking over is covered with blackberry or thistles or some such nuisance, a stock or mechanical approach in preparation is required. Thistles need to be slashed just as the seed head starts to turn purple. This stops them throwing up new seed heads, which occurs if cut too soon, and if cut too late, the seed is viable. This is mainly dealt with by burying the topsoil with the garden beds. Cardboard, newspaper, or any other organic matter goes down first, and then in my case, goat bedding. Stable manure also works. The key, I think, from my observations, is the manure content. Blackberries require several slashings. I have used a domestic lawnmower to clear an acre of the things. Blackberries store excess energy and starches, etc. in their roots. By continually slashing them, the roots are weakened to the point where they die. Slashing also deposits organic matter on the topsoil, win-win. I had to slash 5 times over a summer to remove them from the system. Hot, dirty work, but the soil responded. I've also used Damara sheep on a different property to continually graze blackberries to the same effect. This I prefer as a solution as it doesn't involve fossil fuels and it deposits manures. There is an alternative solution to spraying for all weeds. We just need to understand their growth cycles and their place in the ecology of plant succession. That being the case, principle number 3 becomes obvious: no bare soil. Bare soil in nature is the result of tree falls in a forest, wildfires, and the effects of glaciation. If we understand these conditions, we can see weeds populating the bare surface to protect the soils and begin the process of building them. The best way to duplicate these conditions and call in the natural responses to bare soil is to dig, is to plough, turn the layers of the soil. If we don't do that, we are already ahead of the game, using succession ecology to our advantage rather than creating the conditions we do not want. Let us all create the situations we desire rather than the opposite in our gardens and paddocks. And with that, I'll finish for this week. Remember, decarbonise the air, recarbonise the soil. If you'd like to learn the podcast, drop over to mrjohnmoore.com, link in the show notes, and check out my course. I've been teaching this at community colleges around town and have developed an online version. The next session starts on the 1st of March this year, and I'd really love to see you there. A transcript of this episode is available at worldorganicnews.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back next week.